Asia just rolled out a royal welcome for Donald Trump. But this is not a photo op. This is about power. We're talking rare earths, military alliances, and a possible truce in a trade war that can hit your job, your phone, your groceries. The US is calling it a new golden age. China is watching every move. And behind the smiles, two superpowers are quietly deciding who runs the next decade. This is not a vacation tour. This is positioning for control. Tokyo didn't just open the door, it rolled out the red carpet. Donald Trump lands to a royal-style welcome, handshakes flash, cameras pop, and the message is unmistakable. This visit matters. New Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi steps into the spotlight beside him, and together they sell a headline the world will notice. A new golden age for the US-Japan alliance. But this is more than pageantry. Behind the smiles, both sides lock in deliverables designed to shift real power. A rare earths, critical minerals framework to secure the supply chains that run everything from smartphones to fighter jets, explicitly reducing reliance on China. Tokyo and Washington say it out loud: diversify, harden, secure. Takaichi doesn't waste the moment. She pledges a golden age in relations and even says she'll nominate Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize, a theatrical flourish tailor-made for global headlines. It's symbolism with an edge. Celebrate the alliance, then use it as leverage in the wider US-China contest. Trump reciprocates with effusive praise and a promise that sounds like a blank check. The US will be there for Japan. Anything I can do to help. We're an ally at the strongest level. It's classic Trump. Big language to signal tight alignment, especially as both governments race to lock down minerals and manufacturing. On paper, the deals are concrete. The White House touts a framework to secure critical minerals and rare earths through mining and processing, while a companion readout with Japan's foreign ministry details the summit signing ceremony cadence. Proof this wasn't just talk. Expect ties into energy, AI, and industrial investment, the economic sinews of a long game. And the timing? Calculated. Just days before a potential Trump-Xi sit-down, Tokyo gives Washington a high-visibility win. Meanwhile, reporting out of Asia says the US and China have teed up a broader trade framework, pausing threats like 100% tariffs and tempering China's rare earths export controls. So the Japan leg becomes the bright, confident front end of a larger de-escalation narrative. If that framework holds, these Tokyo signatures won't just be bilateral housekeeping, they'll be the spine of a wider truce. Bottom line for viewers: the visuals were choreographed, the message was loud, and the paperwork was real. Japan gave Trump momentum. Trump gave Japan assurances, and together they put a big bet on minerals, tech, and security, the hard currency of power in the Pacific. Now all eyes shift from Tokyo's cheers to the next room where it counts, the table with Xi. The pageantry fades the second the doors close. The cameras catch the smiles, the flags, the choreography. But inside that quiet room, every word has a price tag. It's Donald Trump and Xi Jinping, two men who've spent years testing each other with tariffs, counters, and carefully calibrated jabs, now weighing a pause button on a trade war that has reached into your grocery bill, your phone's supply chain, and the planning horizon for companies from Detroit to Shenzhen. This isn't a peace summit. It's a negotiation over how much pain each side is willing to defer, and for how long. Listen to the language of this trip: frameworks, understandings, guardrails. Not the sweeping vocabulary of grand bargains, but the practical, lawyerly grammar of a managed pause. That's the tell. Both sides want oxygen, less volatility for markets, fewer headlines spooking consumers, a little room for factories to plan next month's orders without wondering if a fresh tariff will drop at midnight. The vibe is deliberate. Cool down the rhetoric, sketch a path to de-escalation, and buy time. Time for election cycles, time for budgets, time for the world's largest economies to keep the lights on without admitting they blinked. The stakes are not abstract. Tariffs are taxes that show up in product prices, in quiet emails from procurement managers, in shipping schedules nudged a week here, a week there, to avoid a new rule taking effect. And looming over all of it is the nervous heartbeat of supply chains that run on critical materials, chips, components, and the rare earths that make batteries hum and guidance systems think. Japan just underscored that point with a high-visibility push on rare earth cooperation with Washington, and that momentum walks into this room as leverage. The clear signal that the U.S. is stitching redundancy with allies so that Beijing can't choke the world's pipelines without paying a price. That is not a ribbon-cutting photo op. It's a bargaining chip with a signature on it. So what does a truce actually look like when you strip away the podiums? It looks like calendars and checklists. It looks like commitments to pause tariff escalations, while technical teams hammer out annexes. It looks like narrow carve-outs so key goods don't jam up in customs warehouses. It looks like side letters on sensitive sectors, language designed to give both leaders something they can hold up on television and call a win. It is deliberately incremental, intentionally reversible, and absolutely rooted in the here and now. This quarter's prices, this season's planting decisions, this year's inventory plan. And yet, beyond the white-glove diplomacy, there's the drumbeat from back home. In the United States, commentators argue that China is misjudging Trump, that if talks stall, the escalation will be sharper and faster than Beijing expects. You don't have to endorse that view to understand its impact. Opinion pieces serve as wind at a negotiator's back. They raise the perceived cost of failure. They put a fist behind the handshake, in the room that changes tone. It narrows the margin for ambiguity. It makes no deal sound like a trigger rather than a fallback. Label it clearly, opinion, but don't ignore its gravitational pull on expectations. From Beijing's perspective, the calculation is equally blunt. De-escalate tariffs without conceding the long-term tech map. Keep pathways open on trade, but don't unlock the gates on strategic industries. Avoid the optics of capitulation while getting relief from the constant threat of new penalties. That's why the language in any communique will be lawyered to the comma, precise enough to claim progress, flexible enough to survive the first hard test at a port, an export desk, or a regulator's inbox. This is not a marriage. It is risk management dressed in diplomatic formals. And this is where Japan's week matters more than the parade suggested. The new Golden Age rhetoric in Tokyo wasn't just soaring prose. It came bundled with concrete signals on critical minerals. The message to markets, and to Beijing, was unmistakable. The U.S. and its allies are not just talking supply chain resilience. They are writing it down and signing it. That shifts the negotiating geometry. It lowers the fear premium around rare earths and raises the cost of using them as a pressure point. It gives Washington a second lever alongside tariffs, one that doesn't show up as a line item on a shipping invoice, but still changes the calculus at the table. For viewers, the translation is simple. If a framework becomes a handshake, you don't feel a parade. You feel predictability. The price tags on imported goods stop jolting week to week. The news about new tariffs coming fades from your feed. Manufacturers plan next month's runs without hedging every bet. It's not the kind of victory you can stage on a balcony, but it's the kind households and small businesses recognize at the checkout line. Conversely, if the talks fracture, the tariff machine spins up again, export restrictions harden, and the rare earth squeeze returns. Slow at first, then all at once, as inventories burn off and substitution options run out. That's when a geopolitical headline becomes your cart total. None of this erases the deeper contest. Even a clean truce wouldn't settle the rules for next-generation semiconductors, the boundaries of export controls, or the choreography of security in the Pacific. Those files live on their own timelines. What a truce can do is lower the thermostat and tighten the screws on a process. Give officials a year of fewer alarms to define the edges of competition without slipping into economic shock therapy. It's a bridge, and like all bridges, it exists to be crossed, not admired. Watch for the tells. Does the language around tariffs say pause, freeze, or something more conditional like suspend pending progress? Do you see concrete references to sectoral carve-outs, agriculture, industrial inputs that serve as quick ballast for both economies? Is there phrasing that nods to rare earth stability, even obliquely, or an acknowledgement of supply chain coordination with allies? The exact verbs matter. The adverbs matter more. The farther they are from absolutes, the more they're building a runway rather than declaring arrival. Also watch how each capital sells it. In Washington, success will be framed as toughness with results. Tariffs contained without surrendering leverage on technology or national security. In Beijing, the emphasis will be dignity and stability, a choice to cool tensions for the good of growth without bending the arc of long-term development. These are not contradictions. They are mirror images built for domestic audiences. Champagne is optional. Narrative control is mandatory. And then there's patience, the most underrated variable in geopolitics. You can hear it beneath the headlines. An almost theatrical insistence on staying the course, keeping channels open, not overreacting to the next sharp op-ed or stray remark. That patience is not weakness. It's a tactic. It allows both sides to bank small wins, avoid public humiliation, and keep moving the ball down a field where the end zone keeps shifting. In a rivalry this big, breakthroughs are often a series of quiet non-crises. The scene you won't see is the most important one. A late-night call where a single phrase gets softened from will to aim to. A footnote that clarifies enforcement without making it sound punitive. An annex that creates a review in 90 days so both sides can claim accountability while buying more time. That is what a sustainable truce looks like. It's not made for movie posters. It's engineered for endurance. If the negotiators can carry that Malaysia-born momentum into the leader-level room and back out again with wording that survives the next 72 hours of headlines, you'll feel it long before you celebrate it. So yes, watch the smiles. But watch the footnotes more. The test isn't whether the handshake looks warm. It's whether the verbs in the document hold up when the first shipment hits a customs scanner or a regulator has to make a real-world call. If the framework lives, the world gets a breather. Prices steady, supply chains unclench, and the panic premium drains out of the news cycle. If it doesn't, the next headline writes itself in 3 words and 12 letters. Tariffs back on. The pictures from Tokyo will outlive the policy. Handshakes, cameras, a carefully staged promise of a new golden age. But what gives those images weight is everything you didn't see in the frame. The rare earths paperwork, the alliance language tuned for deterrence, and the deliberate timing that turns pageantry into leverage. That's the thread you follow into the next room, where the smiles get thinner and the nouns get smaller. Framework, truce, pause. The headline isn't romance between rivals, it's risk management, engineered to cool the tariff engines before they overheat the global economy. And if you're watching this at home, wondering why it matters, here's the answer in plain English. The result decides whether your cart total quietly settles down or whether the tariffs back on drumbeat returns to your notifications. Start with what Tokyo actually did. The choreography was loud, but the substance was louder. A push on rare earth and critical minerals cooperation, and a shared script that says the US-Japan relationship isn't just friendly, it's foundational. Every mention of security in the Pacific, every flourish about 8 decades of partnership is a message to both markets and Beijing that supply chains are being rewired on purpose. You secure the inputs, the ores and processing that make batteries, chips, and guidance systems possible, and you reduce the power of anyone who thought they could pull a mineral lever and watch the world panic. That's why the Japan leg matters to the China chapter. It wasn't a detour, it was stage 1. Bank tangible leverage with an ally, then carry it across the water. Carry it to what? Not a treaty, not this week. A breathing space. The negotiators have sketched something like a guardrail. Slow the tariff escalation, pencil in sector carve-outs so goods keep moving, and talk in verbs that are careful enough to survive cable news and customs officers alike. It's the uncomfortable truth of modern great power competition. The most consequential breakthroughs arrive disguised as boring intervals. You'll hear words like suspend, freeze, defer, review in 90 days. That is not weakness. It's the plumbing of stability. A truce is not confetti and a balcony. It's calendar invites and side letters. And it matters precisely because it lets supply chains unclench without anyone admitting they blinked. None of that means the room is suddenly gentle. Both leaders have loud constituencies. In the US, the megaphone keeps warning that Beijing is misreading Trump's appetite for escalation, that if the talks stall, the response will be sharper, faster, less forgiving. Label it what it is, opinion, but feel its pressure on the glass. It raises the cost of failure. It narrows the space for ambiguity. It's a soundtrack that turns no deal from a fallback into a tripwire. And across the table, Beijing brings its own script. Stabilize growth, defang the tariff threats, don't surrender long-term tech ambitions, and never look like you yielded. Those parallel pressures are why the language will be lawyered to the comma. Every clause has to sell on 2 televisions at once. So how do you watch this without getting lost in diplospeak? Look for 3 tells. First, the verbs. Pause is softer than freeze. Suspend is softer than lift. Aim to is the softest of all. But each can still create predictability if paired with timelines and review points. Second, the ballast. Do you see quick-hit deliverables, AG buys, shipping clarity, that can steady markets while the lawyers keep writing? Those are not fluff. They're shock absorbers. Third, the minerals. Even an oblique nod to rare earth stability, explicit or tucked into implementation language, signals that both sides understand where the pressure points really are, and that Tokyo's ink has already changed the geometry. If that geometry holds, you won't feel a parade. You'll feel a leveling out. Import prices stop yo-yoing. Lead times stop sliding. Factory managers stop hedging every purchase order like it's a lottery ticket. This is the quiet victory of a managed pause. Less adrenaline in the system. And if it doesn't hold, the gears reverse fast. The 100% tariff talk roars back, export rules harden into habit, and the minerals question shifts from diversify calmly to scramble loudly. We've seen that movie. It ends with headlines about shortages and workarounds, and with you staring at a higher receipt, wondering why a distant communique moved your weekly budget. There's a deeper reason to care beyond the next quarter. Truces like this, when they work, become the scaffolding for how rivals live without constant crisis. They don't end the rivalry, they aim it. They turn daily brinkmanship into scheduled competition, where technology rules and security lines get argued in documents instead of detonated in markets. That's not sentimental, it's strategic, and it explains the Japan leg's tone so well. Big, warm optics to build momentum, tied to cold, specific deliverables that travel well. Call it pageantry with a spine. That spine is patience. You can hear it under all the noise, an insistence on keeping channels open, on not flinching at the next op-ed or the next viral podium line. Patience is the opposite of surrender in this context. It's a tactic. It lets both sides bank small steps without humiliation, stack quiet wins until they look like structure, and keep the guardrails in place, while domestic politics shout for sharper elbows. If you're building a bridge while traffic is still crossing, patience isn't optional, it's the job. And when the cameras move on, that's when the real test starts. Not the handshake, the footnotes. What happens the first time a shipment hits a port and a mid-level official has to decide whether freeze means freeze or freeze unless? What happens when a soybean purchase misses a date and both press offices need a sentence that keeps the scaffolding intact? What happens when a new tech rule brushes the edge of a promise and lawyers argue whether the edge is the center? Truces live or die in those tiny rooms. Rooms with no flags, only fluorescent lights and coffee. So here's the wrap without the sugar. Tokyo gave Washington momentum and minerals. Washington gave Tokyo vows and visibility. Together, they set a table where Beijing has to decide whether it wants a year of stability or a month of adrenaline. If the framework survives, you'll feel it long before anyone throws confetti. If it cracks, the headline writes itself. Tariffs back on, rare earth nerves back up, markets back to breathing through a straw. The images from this trip are already minted. The question that matters is whether the paperwork beneath them can carry the weight of the next year. And if you want a single way to read the answer as it emerges, don't watch the toasts, watch the verbs.